But yeah, do you still have the list, or?
I do. I left it at home because I wasn't prepared to talk about it again today.
That's okay.
But I have spoken to Shliach Ray and Pastor Jesus of the Impact Center, and they are excited, I think, to partner with us on that 50-50 on getting a really good Sukkot plan for next year. And I think it's going to be a spectacular thing. And so what we'll do is we'll form a committee. I would like, ideally, in my mind, it'll be 10 people on the committee. And we're going to narrow down the broad list of things that we could possibly do at Sukkot, narrow it down to what we can really honestly do. And then each person will be in charge of his or her own part of the program. And we'll come back each month to give a report on where we stand on getting those things done. And also what we need to do, follow-ups for next meeting. And then as we get closer to Sukkot, actually, the meetings will be a little bit more frequent as we start dialing in resources, logistics, things like that, and getting things done. But this coming next Shabbat, we will be meeting in Altus, and it will be an Erev Shabbat service, not a Mincha service. So, and it will be meeting at Soborowski's home. And so the Shabbat after that, after we probably do Havdalah, the Shabbat afterwards, then we will have a meeting and decide on the committee, at least the fellow members of the committee. And then I'm scheduled to speak to the Impact Center congregation on December 2nd. That's a Wednesday, for their Wednesday evening service, where I will talk about the appointed times and get their participation for us. So anyway, so it's coming up pretty quick, and we got to get on it because there's a lot of planning that goes into it. But so according to Devarim 8:10, it says, "And you shall eat and be satisfied, and you shall bless Adonai your Elohim for the good land which he has given you. Adonai Elohim, we have eaten and we are satisfied. We thank you for the land in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen, amen." So this is a very Pashat study today on Noach. We're going to talk about just one thing in particular, and we'll discuss that here in just a minute. But first, let's hear from our friends.
Welcome to another episode of Parashah Points, short thoughts from the weekly Torah portion. This week's Parashah point comes from Noach, which is the Hebrew name for Noah, and it goes from Genesis 6:9 to Genesis 11:32. This Parashah tells the story of how mankind became so wicked that God destroyed them with a flood. However, he spared Noah and his family by commanding Noah to build an ark to survive the flood. It also speaks of God's covenant with Noah and then lists all the nations that descended from Noah. Then we learn about the story of the Tower of Babel. There's a lot we can talk about in this Torah portion. Today, we're just going to present a thought about what it means for Noah to have been considered righteous. Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. What does it mean that Noah was righteous? First, Noah's righteousness is further defined as being blameless in his generation. Within the wicked generation in which he lived, he was a light in a dark place. Second, Noah is said to have walked with God. That is why Noah was judged as righteous. But what does it mean to walk with God? Before we get there, in the previous Torah portion, we saw that Noah had found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. The Hebrew word for favor is chen. It is commonly used to denote the concept of grace. Thus, Noah was saved by grace, if you will. That's how he came to have a relationship with God. And the evidence of his relationship with God was his walking with God. For more on this, we would recommend our teaching, The Hebrew Root of Grace. What's interesting is that one of the blessings for obeying God's commandments, according to the Torah, is that God will walk with his people. Leviticus 26, verse 12. I will walk with you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Remember, Yahweh walking with his people was prefaced by Leviticus 23, verse 3, which says, if you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them. So you could say that Noah came to know God by grace, and he experienced the blessing of walking with God because of his obedience to God's ways. That's why he was called righteous. Isn't this the pattern throughout the Bible? Israel was delivered from slavery in Egypt by God's grace. Then they were taken to Mount Sinai and given the Torah as a means of walking with God. We likewise are delivered from the slavery of our sins by God's grace and our faith in the Messiah. And then we are likewise given the Torah as a means of walking with God. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. As we see with Noah, it's possible to be righteous in a wicked world by observing Yahweh's Torah, and thus be a light to the nations. We have found grace in the eyes of God. He sent his only son, Yeshua the Messiah, to die for us and deliver us from sin. Now, let's walk with God and be a light to our generation. Thank you for joining us for another Parasha on Point. We pray that you've been blessed by this teaching, and remember, continue to test everything. Shalom.
So I really like that one. They had two to choose from on Noach. The other one was a little bit longer, but I like this one because the message about walking with God, and it's so important because I can look back on my life and say there were times where I knew I was doing the right thing, and because I was doing the right things, life was going right, and then I started to slip off to the left just a little bit. Or I'd slip off to the right just a little bit, and things would be a little bit more messed up. And then to compensate, I'd slip off just a little bit more, and they would get a little bit more messed up. And then before you knew it, I was in a downward spiral. And terrible times came in my life because of that. And sometimes it's tough for us to stay walking with God. It's tough to say, hey, yeah, I tried to be a righteous man. We know we're not, but we try as hard as we can. And I hope that you all are encouraged to just rely on him for everything, and you'll be walking with him. Rely on him for everything, and understand that you can't do anything on your own. I know I can't. And it's only because of what he does through me that I can do anything. When we get going to this quick study here, I'm going to go through each, like a synopsis of each aliyah. I'm going to pose a question. I'm going to have to go to the back. I'm going to have to change the screen, and I'll come back here. We'll go through part of the study. Then I'll go back and change it back to the slides, and we can finish up. So I just wanted to share a couple of things with you on that. So in the first aliyah, the world had descended into corruption, and only Noach was found to be a tzaddik. Tzaddik means a righteous one. And the same thing, you get the word tzaddik and the word tzedakah. When you give tzedakah, it's sometimes listed as charity, but it's righteousness. Tzaddik. God tells Noach that a Mabul is coming, a flood, and it's going to destroy all of civilization as he knew it, and that only he and his family would survive. He was given the instructions to build a teva, and he was instructed further to bring all of the animals and birds in order to repopulate the earth. And he was also told he needed to stock the teva with food while they were in it. Second aliyah, Noah was commanded to bring 7 pairs of clean animals and birds and 1 pair of each of the unclean animals. And Noach and his family and to board the teva, and the Mabul begins. And it says that the springs of the great depths burst forth and the windows of heavens opened. Pretty poetic, actually. Third aliyah, the rains lasted 40 days, 40 nights, and the water rose to great heights, covering everything, including the highest mountains, because I guess if it didn't cover even the highest mountains, things could have survived, and we know that it didn't. Flood killed all the humans and all the animals. Everything was dead except for Noach and his family and the creatures aboard the ark Elohim caused the wind to blow, which made the water begin to recede steadily for 150 days. Then after 7 months, the ark rested on Mount Ararat. Noach sends birds to see if he could get some kind of understanding of the situation. First a raven and then doves. On the third attempt, of course, the dove did not return, right? So that was the information he was looking for. Fourth Aliyah, Adonai commanded Noach to leave the ark with his family and the animals. He immediately built an altar, and the fate of the animals that he brought with him was brought to fruition there. And he promised that even though the inclination of a man's heart is always evil, he would never destroy the earth again in that same manner. And God blessed Noach and his sons to be fruitful and multiply on the earth. He gave them rules where they could eat meat, but prohibited murder and suicide, and also the consumption of meat with its blood in it. The fifth Aliyah, Noach told that Adonai is establishing his covenant, never to bring a flood to destroy the world, and the sign of the covenant was his bow in the sky, or in the cloud. Sixth Aliyah, Noach planted a vineyard. He made wine. He became drunk. He fell into a deep drunken slumber. While naked, his son Ham saw his father naked. There was some sort of incident. Ham told his brothers, and they, Shem and Japheth, modestly approached, covered him up. When Noach awoke, he cursed Ham's son Canaan and blessed Shem and Japheth. And this Aliyah names Noach's 70 grandsons and the root of the 70 nations in their homelands. The last Aliyah tells the story of the Tower of Babel, and Noach's descendants gathered in the Babylonian valley, began to build the tower in an attempt to reach the heavens. Elohim saw the tower and said, "Look, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. And now they are not going to be held from doing whatever they plan to do. Come, let us go there and confuse their language, so that they do not understand the speech." So Adonai scattered them, and the rest of the reading lists the 10 generations from Shem's descendants to the 10th generation, which is Avram, who married Sarai. And this seventh Aliyah, you might have heard me talking about it last week. It's of particular interest to me because I mentioned that I get texts from NASA that tell me when the International Space Station is going to fly over, and I make a point to get up, even if it's early. I look up at the sky and I watch this thing fly over. It's always there, and it amazes me because this thing in space has been there since 2000. It's been before that, but it's been occupied with humans since the year 2000 consistently. There's never been a time since 2000 when there wasn't a person aboard. And so I think of that, of what we've accomplished, putting men up there, orbiting the earth. And then I think about the Tower of Babel and what they were trying to do. They were trying to build a tower to heaven. And with what we know right now, with everything we know, where are they going to go with that thing? They're not going anywhere. They're going to get just high enough and they're going to pass out because there's no air. You know what I mean? They're not. So it makes me wonder, and I always ask people who have some biblical knowledge, have they ever heard of anything at the Tower of Babel being a metaphor for something else? It has to be. I haven't figured it out personally. Wes did say that because they were unified and they wanted to make war with God, whatever the case is. Wes was on track, I think, when he said that because they all had a unified mind and they could do any kind of evil they wanted to with that. What you got?
Actually, two separate things. The first one is it sounds like God did it because of their arrogance. That they
That's good.
That they believe they could do anything.
Yeah.
That they didn't need God anymore.
No, I'll buy that. Yeah.
In fact, it says
Yeah.
they intended to make a name for themselves.
Yeah. They sure does. It says exactly that.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Yes,
I
ma'am.
also read it, if all of humanity aligned itself with Satan,
Oh,
then what would the apology be?
hasn't it already anyway? Yeah.
I mean,
No.
there's no righteousness left on the earth.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. They'll be right back in the same state they were before the flood in no time. Right. Yeah. That's great. So those are that's a snapshot of the Aliyot. So let's talk about this. My good friend Earl posed a question last week, and it's going to go like this. Noach was 500 years old, and Noach brought forth Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now Noach was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth. This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and brought forth Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. So how can that possibly be? If he was born when Noach was 500 and the flood happened when Noach was 600, he can't be 100 2 years after the flood. Tracking? So let me change the screen really quick and let's go through the math.
Yes, I was gonna say, so is this a rounding error? Because that's what we always look for in science, rounding errors.
Yeah, we're going to go do it, man. Let's see here. All right, can everyone see my Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Excel is perfectly suitable for a problem like this.
Is that an Italian image spelling of image?
Well, I don't know. I'm not worried about the. Here you go. Oh, you got one? Okay, good. So let's start. I want to show you my math. Let's talk about it. Genesis 5:5.
We're not talking about English.
Yeah, I don't talk about my English. Don't worry about that. So just Genesis 5:5 says, so all the days that Adam lived were 930 years and he died. So what I did here was, if Adam was created in year 0, he'd be 1 year old in the year 1, right? So we're going to come down here, and what did it say? It said Adam was 930 years and he died. So let us come down. Oops, too far. And I can show you what I've done here. Hey. I wonder why I can't.
Moved over.
It moved over. I don't know why. Oh, there's why. Oh, okay, good. And the Macs are different than PCs. So I have Adam dying at year 930. Tracking?
Uh-huh.
Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
All right. Next. Oops. Let's keep this up here. These are pretty cool. Then Adam lived 130 years and brought forth a son in his own likeness after his image and called his name Seth. So if we come down here to 130, you'll see that I have Seth's birth at year 130. Tracking? Okay, so Genesis 5:8 says, so all the days of Seth were 912 years and he died. I did a simple equation over here, which you can read up here, which is 130 plus 912 takes us to the year 1042. Everyone agree with that? Oops, going the wrong way. 1042, we have Seth passing away, year 1042. Everybody see that? Okay. Let's get back up there. It's going to be painful. I'm not used to this Mac version of it, but I think it's a good thing that we go through this. Just make sure I know what I'm talking about. Seth lived 105 years and brought forth Enosh. So I did another quick Excel equation. 130 plus 105 takes us to the year 235. Oops. It's backwards. Year 235, Enosh was born. All right, Enosh is born. So all the days of Enosh were 905 years and he died. Little Excel equation, 235, which is when he was born, plus 905 takes us to 1140. Excel is pretty awesome for something like this, but it does get tedious. 1140, right there. Everybody agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oops. I'll get used to it here in a minute. It has to be on. That's Enosh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Come on, baby. Get up there. All right. And Enosh lived 90 years and brought forth Canaan. Quick little Excel formula, 235 plus 90 takes us to 325. And there we go, in the year 325, Canaan is born. So all the days of Canaan were 910 years. Same little equation over here. 325 plus 910 takes us to 1235. Will everyone stipulate the 1235, or do you want to see it?
Yeah. It's not important
Great.
anyway.
And Canaan lived 70 years and brought forth Mahalalel. 325 plus 70 is 395. Let's go see Mahalalel. So I'm going to stipulate that everyone agrees with my death dates. All right. So all the days of Mahalalel were 895. He died. That takes us to 1290. Mahalalel was 65 years old and brought forth Jared. There's the equation. It takes us to 460 for Jared.
He was such a young dad.
Yeah, you notice that as we started going down the line, they started not waiting 700 years to have kids. They started doing it right away, right?
But after the flood, there was a big change.
Big time change. So here we are in the year 460, and Jared was born. So Jared lived 162 years and brought forth Enoch. So what was the equation? The equation took us to the year 622. And Enoch was born in 622. Enoch lived 65 years and brought forth Methuselah, which brings us to the year 687. So here is Methuselah in the year 687. Of course, Methuselah lived 2 million years. So here we go. And Methuselah lived 187 years and brought forth Lamech. So we go down to year 874 for Lamech.
Well, obviously, the longer you wait to have kids, the order you live will be.
Right? So here we are at Lamech, right?
Hey, don't be laughing.
And Lamech lived 182 years and brought forth a son and called his name Noach, saying, "This one does comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands because of the ground which Adonai cursed." The Excel formula takes me down to year 1065.
56.
1056, thank you. Dyslexia. Noach, born 1056, right here. So it's pretty interesting that we can get that far with it, right? Okay, so Noach was 500 years old and brought forth Shem, Ham, and Japheth, which takes us to 1556. 1056 plus 500, 1556. Then the next thing was Noah lived 500 years after the flood, right? Or 600 years old when the flood waters hit the earth. So those are the two things right there. Sorry. Noah was 500 years old and brought forth Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth. So let's go down to the birth of Shem, of course. The other two are right there too, just in case this is, we got this exactly right. There's the flood. There we go. So if what we're reading is correct like that, it says this is a genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and brought forth Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. If Noah was 600 years after the flood, that takes us to, I'm going to take you straight to the flood. Oops. There it is. There's the flood. Starting in the year 1656. Shem was supposed to be 100 years old this year. However, it says that Arpachshad was born 2 years after the flood, and Shem was 100 years old. So we have the problem. We have a missing 2 years that we have to account for. Bless you. You didn't think I saw it. Bless you. Anyone want to disagree with the 2 years missing?
Sure, but let's just let you make your point.
You do want to disagree, huh? Okay. All right, so let me change the screen back. 1 second. And then I'll show you what I came up with. There we go. This. All right. No more Excel, but Excel is a great tool for working out math like that. And I thought I could account for at least one of the 2 years. When I first started doing the math on it, I had actually one tab over, tab 1 on this, I had Noah being created in year 1. And I thought, well, wait a minute, he couldn't have been created in year 1. He
So
had to
you're
have been
saying
created
Adam
in year 0.
Are you saying Adam then?
Adam, that's what I meant. Yeah, Adam. But if you still, the math still adds up. There's still 2 years missing. I thought I could account for one of the years, but when I finally got to it, I'm like, no, that doesn't account for anything. So there's the question right there. So let's talk about it. 2 years. There's one Christian opinion that said that automatically assumed Noah was 500 years old when all 3 of his sons were born, essentially making them triplets. That information is out there. A lot of people say that they were triplets. Noah fathered 3 sons. He was 500 years old. Taking all 3 verses to account, we conclude that Shem was actually born when Noah was 502, that Shem was 98 at the time of the flood, if he had triplets and they were all born when he was 500. So there's the discrepancy. Second? Yeah. All right. So Gary Gardner's version, he has a commentary in his Torah, says that, this isn't the commentary, this is his actual words. It says, Noah was 500 years old, then Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The complete Jewish Bible says Noach was 500 years old, and Noach fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. NIV says after Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. NAS, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So, King James says, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The Sansino Press Chumash says almost exactly the same thing. Hebrew pronunciation, Vayechi Noach ben Chemesh me'ot shana v'oled, Noach Shem echame ve'et Yafet. So, here we go. I'd like to rule out the triplets, if possible. So let's take a look at verse sheet 924, if you wouldn't mind. 924. I'd like to hear some of the other translations. 924 in the ISR says this. It would help if I was in verse sheet and not Deuteronomy. Help a lot. 924 in the ISR. And Noah awoke from his wine, and he knew what his younger son had done to him. Okay, so that we're talking about Ham here, right? What his younger son. Shem, the father, also 1021 says, and also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder. So we got Japheth the elder and Ham the younger. Now, that's okay because we can definitely conclude that Japheth was the oldest and Ham was maybe not necessarily the youngest, but definitely younger than Japheth. Ham was younger than Japheth. That's what we can conclude for sure. And maybe Shem was the middle son. Maybe he wasn't. It's still possible that there were twins in one born or they were triplets, but I want to rule that out. So, Bereshit 9:24 again says, Vayechetz Noach miyeno vayeda et asher asa lo beno hakatan. Here, hakatan is translated as younger son. And we're talking about he saw what his younger son had done to him. Okay? And here in Bereshit 27:15, we're talking about Jacob and Esau. Hakatan is translated as younger son, speaking about Jacob and Esau. So it could apply to triplets or twins, because we all know that Esau came out first and then Jacob, and then Yaakov. So the Hakatan there, Benah Hakatan is younger son. And in some places in the Bible it says it is translated as youngest son. So here we go. Bereshit 10:21. Ule Shem yulad gam hu ko b'nei ever achi Yefet gadol. Yefet yagadol. That is the oldest son right there. So here we have in 10:21 in the Hebrew pronouncing that Japheth is the oldest son. Okay, they could still be triplets though. All right. And if Japheth came out first, Ham came out second, or Ham came out third, and Shem was the middle son, still could be. I don't think so, though. So the 2 years discrepancy here. Okay, so here we go. Talking about Rivka again. And look, Rivka took the best garments of her elder son Esau, which were with her in her house, and put them on Yaakov, her younger son. Her elder son and her younger son. We have the same language for those guys. We also have the same language with the 12 sons of Jacob. But Hakatan is the younger son. Hagadol is the older son, and we know that from Hebrew what that means. This is a talit katan. What your son was wearing earlier was a talit gadol, right? So it's well known that Jacob and Esau were twins.
But that doesn't change that one was still older and one was younger.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It is well known, though. They were twins. And if they made such a big deal out of them being twins, wouldn't you think the scripture would make a bigger deal out of triplets? I would think, but not necessarily, I guess. But they do make a big deal out of it.
Triplets don't appear in the scripture.
Ever. That's exactly right. They don't. So Noah was 500 years old, and his wife began having children. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's necessarily that he had all three of them when he was 500 years old. And this is an interpretation here that is widely accepted in Jewish and Christian. But there still are those other theories, that now Bible says what it says. You can't read into it. And I agree to some extent. But I think, paraphrasing, it says Noah was 500 years old, and then he started having children. His wife began having children. Japheth was the oldest, then Bnei Hagadol, and Ham was the younger than Japheth, Bnei Hachatan.
He might have been younger than all three.
Very possibly. In fact, that's what I personally think.
Yeah, Hakatan can be youngest, or it could just be younger.
That's exactly right. It could be the youngest, or it could be younger. That's exactly right.
And considering Shem isn't mentioned with anything, it sounds like
Again, the word is relative to the other.
Yeah.
You can't. That's exactly right.
Right.
So what about Shem? This is what the sages say. The sages say Shem was the youngest. The rabbis do. They say he was the youngest son, and that the order of his of birth and how they're mentioned is reversed, which is done sometimes because you think about this. We don't say Esau and Jacob. We say Jacob and Esau. And the scriptures say Jacob and Esau. They don't say Esau and Jacob. Ephraim and Manasseh, same thing. They're reversed. So,
but they were reversed.
Yeah. No, I'm tracking with you. Yeah.
So
was everybody else. So was Jacob and Esau, right?
Jacob and Esau, because Jacob took it's almost like order of importance.
Okay,
As
so
opposed
Shem
to
ended up being
order of
listed first then in the Toledot, that his children are first.
That's right. He does. Seemingly because he's the most important.
But his is the lineage that carries on through.
That's exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right. So Josephus, of course, the Jews of the Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 6, paragraph 4, says Shem, the third son of Noah, had 5 sons. This is from Josephus. And of course, in that same book, just above that, it does say that these are meticulous records kept from old. Take it for what it is, Josephus, right? The Jewish Encyclopedia, however, says, although Shem unanimously declared by the rabbis to be the youngest, he is always named first, being the most important of the 3 brothers. Also, in the Jewish Encyclopedia, it says about Japheth, one of the sons of Noah and the ancestor of a branch of the human race called the Japhethites. Japheth and his 2 brothers, Shem and Ham, were born when Noah had attained his 500th year. It is not clearly indicated which of the brothers was the eldest. Japheth usually comes third in order. The words elder are more probably applied to Shem. Still, it seems from a comparison of Genesis 5:32 and 7:6 and 11:10 that Japheth was by 2 years Shem's senior. So what this kind of suggests is that Japheth was the one that was born when Noah was 500. Yes, ma'am.
I was something else in 10:22, that there's the sons of Shem. Our fact that isn't the oldest, reversed.
Right, he's not, but he's the one that's listed, right? Mm-hmm.
So, once again, you have a list, but there's not a specified order,
Right.
and, saying order time with.
And now we're talking about maybe, we know that he didn't have any sons that were born while on the ark. So maybe they had one just coming off of it. It's possible.
Well, in the list,
Or daughters, whatever.
two.
But I used our Pakshad as the example because the scriptures say his wife gave birth to our Pakshad 2 years after the flood when Shem was 100. Right?
There were two children before back then.
Yeah. Right. So what I think is this. That's a big deal. Triplets would be an even bigger deal. Paraphrasing, Noah was 500 years old. That's what I think. And it could be that Shem was the youngest and born when Noah was either 502 or 503. Either theory works. Because when Shem was born, Noah was 502 or 503, about the year 1558 or 1559, making him 100 years old, 2 years after the flood began, or 2 years after the flood was over. Doesn't specify that either. Doesn't say whether it was 2 years after the flood began or whether it was 2 years after it was over. But either theory works if he was born at when Noah was 502 or 503. But it's a pretty cool question. And that's what I think. I don't expect you to think like me. I hope that you'll look it up and take a look at. There's just so much information out there. I had to narrow it down. But I'm telling you, I read all week on this, and I read and I read and I read. And this is the truth. The only ones who truly think that they were triplets are Christians, and not even all Christians, just some. But what most people try to do here is when someone wants to try to disprove the Bible, they'll jump to this right here because they don't have anything better, I guess. But can't be true. So the whole thing's a fake. But if you take a look at how the language reads, I think it was that I personally think that Noah was 500 years old when he started having kids. Shem was born when he was 502 or 503, so that he was 100 years old 2 years after the flood began or 2 years after the flood ended. One of those two. And we can't tell which one it is. We probably never will. We'll probably be, we won't know till it's time for us to know. So,
When we get to heaven, partake in all knowledge.
Right. So, does anybody have anything from the Torah portion they want to talk about?
So what year did you conclude the flood was?
15. I had to look at it again. I'll give it to you. 15. Oh, I got it right here.
So then I'd like to say my piece about all this.
I got it right here. I think the flood began in 1658.
15.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
No.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. No. The flood began in 1658 and it was over in 1659. Because Noah was 500 years old in 1558, or he was 502 in 1558.
Or was 1658 and 1659 when he turned 100?
Yeah, yes. No. Yeah, when Shem turned 100.
Right.
One of those two.
2 years after the flood.
2 years after the flood. So 2 years after the flood began. So then
56 or 57.
Yeah, 1656 or 1657. I'm sorry. That's exactly right. I can look at the spreadsheet again, though. A lot of numbers.
Okay, so my thing on this is we do know from how they counted the years of the kings that partial years sometimes just flat out got disregarded on things. When you say about Adam, was he started in 0 or 1? Well, Hebrew doesn't start any counts from 0 that I know of. They seem to even double count beginning and ending points on things. If you have something that runs from here to here, but then you start another count from here, that same one gets counted again. And of course, in Greek, we would never do that. But in the Hebrew, they start from 1 and the end point gets counted as well. And we don't ever count both in our system. Of course, scientifically, there's good reasons for that. So when it says something like 500 year, to me, there is a lot of room there. First of all, it can be your 500th year. You don't have to already have 500 years behind you. That's our modern thing that we do now. When somebody says how old you are, they say, how many years have already passed behind you? But I could say that I'm 55, or I could say I'm in my 56th year. Then when you beget a child, does the child have to be born the same year that you beget it? And my thing on that is, depending on how you interpret that word, begetting a child doesn't necessarily mean that the child has to be physically delivered in that same year, because a lot of the time the child isn't born until the next year.
Yeah.
I don't know how often that occurs, but it's probably like 70% of the time or something that you beget a child in one year, but the child's actually delivered the next year. So that leaves you room for whether the person actually was that old or not that old, and whether the child was conceived in that year or delivered in that year. And then it leaves you with how far into that year were you? So you might be in your 500th year, but you might be 10 months into your 500th year. You beget the child, and then there's another 10 months till the child is born. And so now you're already, 20 months out from whatever year you were in before that child's even born. So you were in your 500th year, 20 months later, that child's born, but then that little fractions of the year gets sort of ignored, and the next year is counted as that child's first year. So there's a lot of ways that the counting really could be off by just a couple of years in it. So when I was saying rounding error, just to get between 500 and 502, that pretty much could be covered by rounding error. If you're late in 500, and then there's the time from conception until delivery, and then after the flood, that person has sometime they're like 10 months into their year, their 100th year or whatever, and then they conceive the child, then the child still won't be born out until the next year. So there's like kind of room in there for those numbers to still work, just based on rounding errors.
Right. I didn't want to get into all that because it was very complicated. I started off down that path, and I wanted to try to keep things as simple as possible and have a viable explanation. That's why I'm saying I'm not telling you that this is 100% right, but it is a good possibility. Same thing with the rounding problem. That is absolutely a good possibility. I did not find evidence, though, that suggested that child's lives were counted at conception. That was, even though in some cultures in the world do now, begot means when the child was born. That's the biggest opinion that I found. I never came across any of those opinions, and maybe they're out there and I didn't find it, but it never begot or begat never was conception. It was when they were born.
So we have an example that we definitely could check, and that would be in the case of Abraham for Yitzhak, because it says in there very clearly what his age was. I think we should figure it out from that. I've never looked at that.
I haven't either. I didn't look at Abraham. I did look for that, though. I wanted to say, all right, what does begat mean? Is that conception, or is that when the child was born? And I found 110 examples, I'm telling you, of every different person and their uncle saying that it's when the child was born. So it very well, that doesn't mean that was all right.
Even though Hebrew culture specifically uses counting somebody's birth from their conception.
They don't. They do not. That is a fallacy.
Okay. So that I was not suggesting. I was not suggesting they were.
They count a child. Hebrew culture counts a child when he was born.
When they were born, but
for modern
the begot.
What evidence do you? I really like to see that. Seriously, okay. I looked for it. I could not find that, because that's what I was thinking. Because Koreans do that. Okay. Koreans say I'm 2 years old when they're actually 1 year old.
In Hebrew culture, that's what I've been told.
I can't find any evidence of it, okay. And I did look for it. That isn't saying that that's not right. I'm just saying I looked and looked and looked. I could not find that.
Who said can a man beget a child being 100 years old or something like that?
That was Abraham and Sarah, and I thought Sarah was the one that said that.
So, and maybe they're talking about conception at that point.
Right. They were talking about conception.
So my question is, what verb did they use
I'd
And-
have to get in and dig that out, yeah. Excellent question.
And if they use that, what age was he referring to? Because clearly, just from the context, if I know my child's going to be born when I am 101 or 100 or whatever, the question is, can a man who is 101 years old have a child be delivered? And that's obviously not the question.
Right, yeah,
So
yeah,
the
yeah.
question is, can a man conceive
make
a
it?
child
Yeah,
when
that's
he
good.
is already 100?
I'll check, I'll go down that
Sarah,
path.
It was, she was already.
She was already past the way of women.
Yeah, I'm already past the.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's a good question.
I do think that saying that, to me, just looking at the Hebrew, I'm glad you had that there. It looks like it's a sentence, it's a statement of fact.
Yeah.
Noah was 500 years old.
That's what it looks like, yeah, yeah.
And done. Noah's 500. Then it says Noah started having children.
Yeah.
And he had these 3 kids. It really doesn't say anything about when the 3 of them were born relative to each other, or even
It doesn't say a
relative to
word,
being
that's exactly
500.
right.
It's just like 500, that's a milestone in his life. He hit that milestone.
Yeah.
And then.
And then he.
And we can conclude that Japheth was older than Ham. We can
Yeah.
conclude that for sure. That's it. What do you got, Jim? Got any questions or anything to add?
Got a good nap.
Got a good nap? Is that boring?
Sorry about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is something I wonder, because to me, it seems like the flood is very much a reciprocation of the old enforcement, like a judgment on the world. You know what I'm saying? Is that ever out there at all, or is that just something that comes up, you know?
I've not heard of it. That doesn't mean it's not. That just means my limited capacity, I haven't. But it makes sense.
Well, it's because they said in the ancient world that the flood possibly gave birth to the Halloween type holidays instead of like the Day of the Dead and stuff like that. Because
Wow.
it was something that haunted people for hundreds of years after, you know, the death and destruction and all that. But I was thinking that we wouldn't think Halloween, we think of Yom Kippur, a day of destruction and death and judgment and, you know.
Wouldn't it be the 9th of Av instead? Because Yom Kippur is Day of Atonement, not necessarily Day of Destruction.
Well, I mean, like, as in the sense of the last, you know, like the day of, you know, down the door shut and all of it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to dig into that too. And I haven't.
The 17th day of the 7th month would fall during Sukkot, but none of those dates lined up to any of
They
the.
don't, and that's what.
Of the appointed
You know,
times.
we're talking about the rounding and stuff like that. If you look at it, it says in the year of Noah's life. But I wonder if they're only using his life or but when you show this on your own, I guess.
Versus a calendar, like was he actually born on a V1 so that the calendar year matched up to his life years?
Yeah, that's what I mean, because my brother.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, he showed me that, so I was like, I think this is, and he's like, no, it's the second, or the second month instead of something. It's very clear, it's very, it keeps on saying, of Noah's life.
Yeah. That's all I have. Took a long time to go through all that math because I was trying to be pretty meticulous with that.
I am in big trouble, maybe. But let's see here. So it does say. It says Abraham was 99 years old. But in mine, this is written in italics, so I can't tell what the original Hebrew has.
Yeah.
Abraham didn't say, can a man who is 99 conceive? He did say, can a child be born to a man who is 100? Or can Sarah bear a child at 90?
Right. Take a look at it, and if you can find. I always like to go back and make corrections when possible. Anybody got anything else from the portion?
I just have a wonder
Yeah.
about the begats.
Okay, not an expert, but I'll sure try.
Well, this is the thing. It's probably more of something that would have to be gone through and
Studied
looked
out.
at very extensively.
Yeah.
When it said begat, that's the term that was put there, but that's not the Hebrew term for it. And I'm wondering if there's more than one Hebrew term.
Possibly. Oh yeah, there is. Because I went through it.
And they can mean different things in the Hebrew. Hebrew has, they have different words for very specific things.
Yes.
Okay, Bereshit 17:17, if you want to look at it.
Okay, one sec. So, let me look at it here. This would be easier.
Because I know there were times when certain things were interpreted as a son was born to so-and-so, and then at other times it said the son was conceived, or a child was conceived.
15. 17:17 says, Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old, and shall Sarah that is 90 years old? Okay, let's see if I can figure out what word that is. What's that?
My Tanakh. I've got the English and the Hebrew.
Yeah. Same. Okay, that's a child. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to say there are two different words. 17, okay, here we go.
Well, the interesting thing is that Abraham was 99, and yet his question was, can a man have a child born when he's 100?
Right.
Which I thought wouldn't be the pertinent question.
No, it was. 9 months. He would be 100 by then.
Yes, the question is whether you can conceive a child when he's not whether the child can be born when he's 100.
Well, I'm wondering if the question was more along the lines of, am I going to survive long enough to see him be born? Or possibly have the time to raise him as he's growing up.
That could be because Ishmael was when he was 86. Probably wasn't really that much earlier.
Actually, it's going to be the same. There's one word. It's yalad.
So it's the same.
Yalad.
This word.
Yep.
This is the birth for anything.
The birth is yalad. Yep. Yalad is for birth and begat. Yalad. Which is interesting because Yalid is boy and Yelda is girl. What else? That's all I got.
Other than shooting down objections to the Bible, what practical application is there for this?
Knowledge.
Oh, well, okay. So, right. The good thing is so that
Apologetics.
somebody doesn't trip you up with that. Yes, apologetics.
Apologetics. Knowledge. That's pretty much it. Adonai Elohim, thank you for the opportunity to come and study. It does lift us up. It does strengthen us. We praise you in Yeshua's name. Amen. When everyone comes out, we will do some Birkat Kohanim and go home.
quickly.
Yeah, believe me, I put a lot more into it than it took to get through it. Go. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Put in the bar. Hey, Ben, you got a second, man? Got a second?